Hello. So, this week I want to talk about nostalgia cash grabs. You know, when a company decides to bring back an old product where to basically bank on nostalgia. Because sometimes these products can be pretty good, other times they're just a waste, I guess you could say. And it's funny because, as I'm wearing a reptile shirt with all these nostalgia posters behind me, but yeah, as you can probably tell from a lot of my content, I'm a huge nostalgia nerd, but there are still some things that I feel like are best left in the past. Like, for example, let's talk about, 90s fads, which I know I don't look it, but I was born in 87, which I say that all the time. I have one of those baby faces. It's like Haley Joel Osment, I think he's a couple of years younger than me, and you look at him now, he has this big thick beard and everything, and yet you still see that little kid face from The Sixth Sense. But so I remember a lot of the fashion of the 90s, like Furby, Pogs, Gigapets / Tamagotchi, what the heck was there? Push balls, I think were part of it. Beanie Babies, Silly Slammers, those little beanbag things with faces on them, then you slam them and they'd make a funny sound or whatever. Out of those things I just listed, how many have we seen resurface in the past decade or so? Remember, was it 2011 or something when Furbies came back, and I was just like, okay. You could go into a Newbury Comics, you could see Tamagotchis, and it actually, I think it was a few years ago, I went into Target, and I saw Pogs. It was a different name, but it was literally the exact same thing. And it's funny when you think about it, how Pogs, which Pogs was basically a game, but I just kind of bought them for collective purposes. Back in the day, I participated in a lot of these old fads and stuff. I still have a closet full of my Beanie Babies. Yeah, Pogs was literally they were just little pieces of cardboard with pictures on them. It's funny when you think about it. It's like, wow, we really had imaginations back then. And it's funny because it's like when you're a kid and you're there's some new fad, hot toy or gimmicky thing that's it'll be popular for a while and then it'll die off because that's how fads work. And then, a lot of us, when we were kids, we're like, oh my god, I have to have that. And then when you're an adult, you see this new fad toy and you're like, yeah. It's like when fidget spinners came out, and it's and it was I'm not gonna knock anyone for buying them. If parents buy them for their kids for birthdays or Christmas or whatever, whatever, it's not my business. But at the same time, I'm yeah, those are definitely a fad. And sure enough, they were. Another one that some people consider them to be a fad, even though it lasted so long, was Tiger handheld electronic devices. Those little, which was kind of like a cheap alternative for Game Boy. I remember my brother had an X-Men one, I had a Star Wars one. My family had quite a few of the ones that were based off of board games, Sorry, Connect 4, Perfection. God, I think there was one of Monopoly. That's a big game, but for the time being, we're talking 80s, 90s, they were a pretty neat little device, just for a little, like I said, it was a cheap alternative for Game Boy, which, the thing with Game Boy is a lot of those, some of those games could be pretty long, so it's I guess Tiger Electronic could be just a quick little fix type of thing, so to speak, or a little, for a little, if you were taking a shorter trip or something, you weren't, you know what I'm saying, whatever, I don't know. But I remember a few years ago, I found an article that was they were, I don't know if they did or not, but it's they were talking about bringing them back, and I'm just why? I mean, I understand maybe people want to collect them and stuff, but at the same time, it's what, why? Why, of all things, why would you bring something like that back? Because we have seen, toys, resurface. I remember the tail end of 2020, Micro Machines came back, which, that's actually pretty cool. Because it's introduced to a new generation, as well as, some of us who just are, like to collect stuff. I bought quite a few of them myself, and my nephews love them. So, I don't think they did too well. I mean, I think they did okay, but not great. Like, I think you can still find them at Target, like Walmart. They ended up on clearance. They did moderately well, so for a time, I guess. Or another thing is sequels to titles for movies or TV shows or something that happened like way back when. Like, for example, two movies that from my childhood that to this day I love were like Space Jam. Remember when that came out, and I was obsessed with that movie, and I still love that movie. And then there was Hocus Pocus, you know, which is to this day is like my favorite Halloween movie, or one of my favorite Halloween movies. But when they made sequels to those, I was like, I don't know, I just don't really have a desire to see them. Like, or at least not right away. Like, I mean, I will see them eventually, but it's just like I don't have this. It wasn't like these things are like, oh my god, I have to see those. I was like, I'll watch them whenever, because I just feel like a nostalgia cash grab. Because it was just like, I don't know, I don't really have a desire to see them. Some of them can be pretty good, though, like Tron Legacy, which was a sequel. You know, the original Tron movie came out in the early 80s, and I still love that movie. And then the sequel, which came out in, I think, 2010, you know, and that's a great movie. Like, a funny story, I remember I went to see it in theaters with my brother, our sister, and her husband, our brother-in-law, and there was probably like 6 or 7 other people in the theater, and then there was like a half hour of the movie left and the projector broke. So one of the ushers gave us all free passes, and then we went to see it again. But yeah, I have that on DVD still. That's a great movie. I liked it. You know, see, some sequels to old movies can be good, but other times it just feels unnecessary. Like the Candyman sequel that came out, it was like, because I loved the original, and I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I was just like, yeah, it just wasn't good. And it's funny, I used to be very stubborn when it came to stuff like this, like especially like remakes and reboots. But as I gotten older, I've become more lenient. There are still some that I refuse to see, like 2 movie remakes that I'm just like, nope, all set, are RoboCop and Ghostbusters. I'm just like, pass. Not the sequel Ghostbusters, but the remake one that came out like a few years ago, 2016. But it's like, something like It, for example, which technically not really a remake because it's based on a book, but I still have a soft spot in my heart for the 90s movie, but I liked the new one way better. Like, I don't know, I just thought it was a lot better. Like, it was, well, yeah, it was a lot scarier. Because that's the thing, I love Tim Curry, but his portrayal was kind of more funny rather than scary, whereas drawing a blank on his name, the guy who played him in the new movies is a lot more creepy and more intimidating. Even just his overall appearance is like creepier compared to the Tim Curry Pennywise. Even the Child's Play remake with Aubrey Plaza, I believe her name is, you know, Mark Hamill voicing Chucky, which I thought it was a pretty good movie. It's not as good as the original, or, you know, because nobody could ever beat Brett. I mean, Mark Hamill is a great actor, voice actor, but nobody could ever top Brett. I can never pronounce his name. Dourif. Nobody could ever top his performance as Chucky. You know, but the remake was pretty good. Original series definitely way better. I don't know. Or what about video games, like collections, or, you know, you have like collections, or like the little plug-and-play console things and stuff, which, yeah, I know, emulators exist, but the thing is, I've said this in videos before, when it comes to retro gaming, I like having options. Like, take the Super Nintendo, for example. I have the original hardware, the SNES Classic Edition, and I use emulators. I just like having options. And the other thing with those is they're great for, like, more like casual gamers, like, you know, somebody who, like, when Nintendo was doing, like, the NES Mini and the SNES Mini and stuff, and it was like, I could think of people who, I know personally off the top of my head, I could think of them I could see them walking into, like, a Walmart and say, like, oh my god, it's the Super Nintendo, I remember that. And it was like, oh, it's a little mini one that comes with all these games built in, like, you know, that'd be great for the kids or something, or for them, or whatever, like, you know, because you really think, like, a soccer mom is gonna buy like a laptop, and then put a bunch of like ROMs on it and give it to the kid for Christmas. Like, no, they buy the little mini thing. But another thing is, like, TV is another one, like TV shows, which Nickelodeon bringing back a lot of their classics. Like, the Rugrats reboot, it's okay. Like, I actually kind of like it. It's not as great as the original, but it's not bad. My only gripes with it are that they made Susie 2, so she's basically one of the babies rather than being the older kid that helps them with their problems. You know, she's like the kind of friend/rival of Angelica. And the other thing is the eye animation is a little off. It's basically like let's say, here's somebody's eye, and here's their pupil. So it's like the pupil will be right here, and then it's right there. Like, it's like the pupils don't move. They basically glitch back and forth. It's really weird. Or some of the other ones, like, what the hell do you call it? Double Dare. That one, again, it was good, but not as great as the original. And then all that was just because the funny thing is, all that was a show I loved as a kid, but rewatching it as an adult, it's not as funny as I remember. It's still moderately entertaining. Like, I might put it on here and there, but it's kind of, I guess, just not. It's not as great as I remember. We'll put it that way. You know, but it's still moderately entertaining, but not like it was when I was a kid. You know, it's very meh. But then with the reboot, it was just so. I don't know. The comedy was just. It wasn't good. We'll leave it at that. And people always say like, oh, but it's like for kids. Well, because it's like the way I see it, just because something is aimed at kids doesn't mean adults can't enjoy it. And still, sure, this was made for a new generation of kids, but it was also a nostalgia cash grab, you know, because, you know, they know how, you think how huge Nickelodeon was in the 90s, that's why they keep bringing back all these old 90s shows, or remaking them, I should say. But and that's the thing, it's like I said, the original All That, sure, it's not as good as I remember, but the cast members, it felt like they had more passion about what they were doing, whereas the remake, it just seemed like the kids were trying too hard to be funny. Like, they just didn't really have much passion as much as the original cast did. And speaking of TV, another thing was, I remember how they tried to bring G4 back as a YouTube channel, which, I remember, what was it, like, over a year ago? I want to say, like, early 2021 or something. Like, I had heard about it, that this was coming back, and I was like, as much as I loved that network in the day, I'm like, back in the day, like, early 2000s, I'm like, why is this a thing? And when it came out, and I was like, I probably watched some of the content. It was just so meh, because it was like a different time period when it was an actual TV network, and it was funny that the fact that that channel is basically dead now, not the network, but the YouTube channel. It's like, I'm not surprised. I know a lot of people say it's because of Frost's rant, which I'm not going to get into all that, any political type of stuff, but, and I do think that is part of the reason for the channel's downfall, but I don't think it's the main reason. I think, the way that I see it, that channel was a ticking time bomb, and her rant just accelerated the countdown, because I remember, when I think back to that network back in the day, it was like, shows like Arena, where you had these two groups of guys that would play multiplayer games. Like, I remember they did like these mini tournament type of things, like they play Unreal Tournament and some mech robot game. Then they also, the third game was different for each episode. Like, sometimes they play Tekken 4, or they play Mario Golf, Toadstool Tour, a racing game, whatever. It you know, it was different for every episode. But it's like, oh, this when I think back to that, it's like, oh, that seems familiar. Oh, it's basically what Let's Plays are, which there's millions of on YouTube. You know, content creators of all sizes. Or it's the same as like people who do live streams on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and etc. Another show I loved was Filter, which was countdown episode. Each episode was different countdown. Like, you know, you have one episode would be top 10 N64 games, or it would be top 10 video game villains, top 10 platformers, or whatever. You know, because I always loved countdown stuff. Again, millions of those right here on YouTube. Or shows that, like, did, you know, those shows that did game reviews, those shows that showed you how to do tips and tricks on games or cheat code stuff. Again, all that on YouTube, or you can find them in other places. Like, you know, if you don't want to watch a YouTube video, you can try reading some stuff, like reviews and stuff. And I was just like, because like that's the thing. I was like, G4 was coming back to the YouTube channel. I'm like, why? That was like a different time period, you know, where that was like in the early, back when TV was still strong. You know, it wasn't until like YouTube came out, what was it, like 2005, 2006, and then it started taking off in like 2008. You know, streaming services came out a few years later, and that's pretty much what everyone goes to now. Like, you know, hardly anyone watches TV anymore. I pretty much don't. Like, I mostly use streaming services and DVDs and stuff like that, because that's why I was like, yeah, when that G4 was coming back, I'm like, this is definitely not going to last. It's like, it's doomed to fail from the start, because I don't sound like a broken record, but it was a different time period. But, yeah, those are just some of the things I can think of for nostalgia cash grabs. Like, is there any you guys can think of? Let me know in the comment section below. Or maybe if there's some that you think have done well or are pretty cool, let me know about that too. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.